I'm guilty of tooling. I'm an engineer and we engineers love to use a lot of tools. But today I'm going to democratize sourdough baking. No expensive tools, just basics that you can find. And we will be doing a very quick recipe for people who don't have a lot of time. I empirically tested this recipe on my friends and they just loved it.
Did this guy just say friends? This bread nerd only has a sourdough as a friend.
Well, that may be the case. You will get a super crispy crust paired with a soft, fluffy crumb. And let me now show you what that looks like when you follow this recipe so that you know what you're buying into in this video. I'm so hungry again. I hope you are too, because you're gonna be baking an amazing bread. So let me just quickly start by showing you the tools which I would normally use and what we're going to be using today. The one fundamental tool I believe is that you always need to have a scale, at least when starting, because just slight changes, just one parameter change can already be a big difference. So you want to have a scale. Just in comparison, this is what I normally use. I use 14% protein flour. I use my bench scraper. I use a lame. I use a fancy Dutch oven. But today, nope. I'm not gonna be using any of that today because I want to show you how simple it is to bake a bread. And there's one point I'm trying to make which I will put extra focus on. That's the fermentation process. A healthy, good fermentation process is really the basis for everything. No expensive tools needed. So let's get started with what I'll be using today. Some sourdough, some flour. I am using a very cheap flour in this case, something I could find. The flour has around 10 grams of protein, some yeast and a little bit of salt. You need a tray like this, a scale, a knife and another tray like this. You need 2 of them. Now this flour here has 14% protein, this one only has 10% protein, so I need to be reducing the water content just a little bit. I would be using 80% water, which is 80 grams of water per 100 grams of flour. Here I will be using 65%. The amount of water that you should be adding to your flour really depends on the amount of protein. In this case, I got a very basic German flour. And it has around 10% protein, and for that 65%, so that 65 grams of water per 100 grams of flour is a very good setup. It's an easy setup. The dough is not going to be too sticky. You don't need to have that much of a perfect technique. So this is a good ratio. Just a small side note, in Germany that's type 550. In the US this would be called all-purpose flour. Most of the leavening, most of the rising of the dough is not going to come from the sourdough, but rather from the yeast. The main purpose of the sourdough is just to give a little bit of sour taste to the whole dough. In fact, this sourdough has been sitting in my kitchen for 24 hours, so it's super acidic probably. Now you're probably wondering, why is he using yeast together with sourdough? To me, that's a great hack when I have time constraints, but I'll be elaborating a little bit more in a second. Just for science and just for you, one thing which I like to do is I like to taste my sourdough just to check how sour it actually is. So this is the gross looking sourdough. Oh, it just smells. I like to do this to measure how sour my sourdough is before adding it to the dough, because the more sour your sourdough is, the more acid you have. The problem with that is that this acid is going to attack the gluten network at some point. So you might have trouble shaping your bread or just working with the dough. This happens when your dough is too acidy. But now, let me try to taste this. It smells vinegary. See, the flies are even coming. Oh no. Definitely way too sour. You see that fly? Is that the sourdough or is that me? So that was just for science and it really tasted very bad. The point I was trying to make is that this sourdough starter would not work for just sourdough-based bread. You would want to refeed that sourdough to reduce the amount of pre-fermented flour which you add to your sourdough. However, when baking with yeast, which is what I'm doing because I don't have that much time, this is a great way to add additional flavor to your bread. Now, if you don't have a sourdough, no problem, you could just omit that sourdough. But since I'm a sourdough nerd, I love using sourdough with everything. And this to me is a great combination of both worlds. Lastly, if you're a sourdough baker and you have a discard starter jar with a lot of leftover sourdough, this is a great recipe where you can use some of that discard starter and mix it into this dough. You will have amazing taste. But now let's get started with mixing everything together. Water. 390 grams, 65%. I'm using 600 grams of flour. 600 grams of flour, 2% of salt, that's 12 grams. Salt. Sometimes I get this right, that's so satisfying. 1% of dry yeast. If you only have fresh yeast, you want to be using, instead of 6 grams, you want to be using factor 3. Math, please help me. I will now be adding that sourdough starter. Again, it's not going to be leavening the bread, it's mostly for the taste. I'm going to be adding around 20%, that's 120 grams of sourdough starter. Now, the sourdough starter, 20%, it just smells so gross because it already fermented for a long time. Danger, danger. Don't make sure this does not get into contact with your sourdough, else you will have contaminated your sourdough. Careful, careful. And now what you want to do is you just want to mix everything together, then let it sit for 15 minutes and the gluten will automatically form. No kitchen machine needed. Just mix it a little bit, let it sit, and you will have so much free kneading. And for this, you just take your hands, go inside and start rotating. Just have a look at the dough tearing right now. I've been just stirring it for around a minute, I guess. I'll just keep doing that a little bit more, making sure that I take all that flour here from the edge of the container. I don't want to lose something. Then I will just let this sit for a little bit and you will see how magically this dough is coming together just by letting it wait. This is called Autolyse. One guy corrected my English, my Danglish, German English. I said Autolyse before, but it's Autolyse. Or wait, I'm getting confused now. Autolyse, Autolyse. Sorry. One very important trick is give your dough a good pat. This makes your dough happy. Now we will let this sit for 15 minutes and then have a look at the dough again. Oh, and side note, you want to make sure that you close the lid. You could use any container, it doesn't matter. Just make sure it's closed. If you use a bowl, make sure to add some kitchen foil, I think is the name in the English, kitchen foil on top of it. This transparent thing, you know, that you can put on top so that it doesn't dry out. You want your dough to not dry out. 15 minutes passed and let's have a look at the dough. Pro trick, you want to wet your hands. That way it becomes less sticky. Let me just pull that dough and show you whether the dough came together or not. I hope. And yes, you see, we can just, oh no, it tears a little bit. But I mean, it's more or less, it's okay, I would say. Maybe that's just a low protein flour. I was hoping to show you a better window pane effect, but let's see about this bad boy. It's already kneaded quite a lot. I'm just going to take the dough and I will rotate it a little bit like this, stretch and fold more or less until it looks like this, and then I will take it out and I will place it on my kitchen surface. Now we will be doing something called bench kneading. And don't use any flour, please don't use any flour, no flour. You want your dough to stick to the surface, that's really what you want. That way you can pull the dough and flip it on top of itself. Here you pull it and fold it over. This is a really good way to create dough strength. Bench kneading. Okay? So take it, fold it on top of itself. And you can see the dough just stays together. It does not lose its shape. So like this, we already created a lot of strength inside of the dough. Now one exercise which I would like you to do, which you will need for later on, we will already be shaping the dough. I will show you how to shape it, and you see it's still relatively sticky. And this is what you will be doing later on. At the same time, you will also learn how to shape, okay? So take the dough, flatten it out a little bit like this. And this is very sticky, right? But that's the purpose of this exercise. Lay it out flat, a little bit like this. Now take this and fold this into the middle. Take the other side. Pull this and fold this over as well. Like this. Now rotate the dough a little bit with swift movements. Come on, Mr. Dough. Normally I would be using a bench scraper for this. Okay, I can't rotate it fully, so I'll just show you. Wet your hands again a little bit. Pull this out, roll this over. I'm wetting my hands again a little bit. Pull this out, roll this over. Pull this out, roll this over. And keep doing that. And this is how we will shape the bread in the end. So you got a good exercise on shaping. Now what I like to do is, I just like to round up the dough a little bit. But it doesn't work. Come on, Mr. Dough. I'm just taking my hands like this and I'm pulling the dough. This is normally what I would be doing with my bench scraper. It's coming together now. Good exercise as well to just get a feeling for whether your dough stays together or not. So I would say that's about it. This is all the strength we need for the dough. We will now be putting it into the main container. One small trick though. I'm taking a small part of this dough, okay? And I will be putting it here into a tiny other container. Now the bulk fermentation, this is what we're doing. This stage is called bulk fermentation. This will be done the moment the dough doubled in size. This is hard to see though in the other container. And that's why I like to take a tiny piece of this dough, put it in another jar, and mark this with a rubber band. Make sure to cover this as well. And then I can quickly see from the side whether this doubled in size or not. And then I know I'm ready for the next stage. So the timing depends on whether this doubled in size or not. I'm not gonna give you an exact timing. We will observe our dough. This is what I was talking about. This is the technique. This is the good technique that you want. So I'll mark this with a rubber band, cover this with some foil, and put this dough here back into the other container. It's starting to stick. Just take it. One more time. I'm using the tension of the surface. Good looking dough. And now back to the main container. I'll be letting this sit until double in size. I'm just gonna give this one more stretch and fold in around 30 minutes or so. And here we go with rubber banded. Make sure to cover it so it does not dry out. This should always stay in the same environment as your dough so that you have the same setup. So the dough is not there yet, but it's already been increasing in size. It looks nice and bubbly. I'll now be doing one more stretch and fold. Actually, it's the first stretch and fold. Let me show you how to do that. One thing you need to know about stretch and folding is you want to be gentle with your dough. If you are not gentle, you are going to degas and damage your dough structure. So there's one technique which is called the coil fold, and I'll be showing you how to do that. Make sure you wet your hands. Gently go around the dough to make the dough not stick to the container. Like this. And now with wetted hands, go inside and lift the dough upwards and fold it over. Now rotate. Same thing again, slowly take the dough and fold it over. One more time from the side. Take the dough, fold it over. And now I will take the whole dough, rotate it like this, and just place it like this. Good looking dough. Give it a nice tap. And let's wait for a little bit more. I guess around 30 minutes more, 20 minutes more or so. So I feel we're almost there, and just a side note, it's better to finish the bulk fermentation always a little bit earlier than too late. So let's proceed and shape this. I'm just going to be transferring my dough to this bowl here just so that I can visualize you how it will come out. At the bottom, I already prepared my tray and I add a little bit of parchment paper. You can skip the parchment paper and also just use flour. But my tray was a little bit of a mess, so I opted for the parchment paper option. Let's start by putting some flour here on the tray. Then we will put that to the side. Again, if you don't have any parchment paper, that's totally okay. Now, do you remember what we did at the start after we put everything together and we kneaded it on the bench? And then I also tried shaping it where I failed. This is exactly what we want to do now. Now is the moment where you will start using a little bit of flour. Sprinkle some flour here on the dough. And sprinkle some flour on your surface. If you're just getting into baking, use a little bit more flour. This is totally okay. Now we will take the dough, flip this over, and hopefully it will come right out. No. Come on, Mr. Dough. Yeah. Fail. So this is not very good, probably because I just changed the container and this container wasn't wet at all. Okay, it came out just fine. All good. Now spread the dough a little bit more apart like this. Chances are you don't have to do this. It's just in my case because I transferred the container. This is how your dough should look like before you shape. And it should not stick here. Very important, dough does not stick because you used flour at the bottom. Now we try to glue the dough together more or less. We will take this, put this into the middle, fold this over, and then we will roll the dough together, okay? And if you don't feel comfortable with this, go back to the step for the kneading and remember what you did there. So take this, pull this outwards and flap it down here in the middle. Don't tuck it too much. We don't want to degas the dough. You see those tiny nice bubbles? We don't want to degas them. Take this and fold this over as well. Tuck this down here. Nice looking dough. Rotate this. Flour your hands a little bit more. We will pull this out and stretch this a little bit and then tuck it down right here. And keep doing that. Push it with the thumbs in a little bit. Keep rolling. Nice looking dough. Beautiful dough, isn't it? We will place it now on the tray. Now, this is going to be a little bit tricky. Normally I would use my bench scraper, but gently like this. I'm transferring it to my tray. Some people like to close this here, but I'm not going to do that now because I just want to stay safe. When is this ready? When is this ready? Now the proofing stage starts. This is ready the moment it passes the finger poke test. Put some flour on your hand and then poke the dough. And you can see how fast this springs back, right? There's almost no dent left anymore. This means the dough is not ready yet. We want to wait until the dent almost does not come back. And when you feel it's getting close, you should already start preheating your oven because then we also have to bake it. So this is the dough. It will now rest. Normally I have a baker's line in, but in this case today, I will just be using a just regular kitchen towel like this. It's going to dry out a little bit, but that's totally okay. Side note, which I forgot. I will now be finger poking this every 15 minutes or so. so the dent almost does not recover. This is ready for baking, I would say. I'm gonna be preheating my oven now. And this is my setup. You don't need the stone. I'm just leaving it in here because I'm lazy. This is the tray. I'm gonna be preheating everything for around 15 minutes. Remember the second tray I told you about? This is what we need. We will be placing it on top of the other tray. And then the steam is really the most important thing during baking, will be trapped here below. So, pretty much like this. This is where our bread will go, and then this will be on top of the bread. And this is the reason why you want to get a Dutch oven. The Dutch oven traps that steam, makes sure there's no Maillard reaction, but this way we can just do it without buying an expensive Dutch oven. Maximum temperature, Americans, this is Celsius. For the baking process, steam is super important. I'm starting to boil some water. Oven is preheated. And now let me show you one more time the finger poke test. I think we are almost a little bit too late. Oops. And you can see that then really slowly recovering. So this is definitely ready for baking. We wouldn't want to wait any more minute. We will be scoring the bread now, which means we will be cutting the dough right in the middle. Normally, I would be using a lame or a lame like this with a razor blade, which is very sharp, but today I'm just using my unsharpened knife because I just want to visualize you that this is also totally doable. When cutting the bread, you want to make sure that you cut the bread at a 45-degree angle. This means you will get a nice ear in the oven, and an ear is a small part of the dough that just grows outwards. It becomes very crispy and it's just adding so much incredible taste. That's what I'm hoping for, but let's see. This to me is always one of the trickiest parts because, yeah, you just have one attempt to score it and you can really screw up. What I like to do sometimes is I take the dough when it's almost ready and I toss it in the fridge overnight because scoring a cold dough is a little bit easier, plus the gases are cold and they will expand more in the oven. But let's just give this a shot. At a 45-degree angle with a swift movement. If you feel uncomfortable, try using an apple or so, just to experiment a little bit with scoring. So swift movement, just like this around here. Okay. I think that went better than I expected. Just some decorative pattern now, which I always like to apply. I think I'm not cutting deep enough though. Nope. And now this is ready to be baked. Start by putting this into the oven. I did not preheat this. And lower the temperature. So no fan, you don't want to blow away that steam. And here we will be reducing this to 230 degrees Celsius. Place it inside of your oven. And now we need to add that boiling water. Close the oven, and all that steam will get trapped right there. So for how long should you bake and what temperature should you bake? I like to bake for around 45 minutes at 230 degrees Celsius. But this also really depends on how dark you want your crust to be. This is your personal preference. One thing which I always like to do though is... Shit, I forgot what I always like to do. Right, now it's coming back. That's actually steaming for the first half of the bake. So you want to be using steam for the first half of the bake, then remove that steam. Afterwards, you want that crust to be developed. At the start, you want to have as much oven spring as possible, but then you want that crust to be developed. So first half of the bake steam and then remove the steam. Now our dough already baked for around 25 minutes. I'm going to be removing the source of steam now. Steam removed, and I'm now removing the top tray. Are you ready to see the bread? I'm gonna make you wait a little bit longer. Good looking bread right here. It even has a little bit of an ear. Look at that. So I'll put the timer for another 15 minutes now, and then let's. It's been around another another 20 minutes, and this is our bad boy. Let me take that dough out. Wait, it's not a dough, it's a bread now, I guess. Does the act of baking turn a dough into a bread? Oops. The final bread, we need to let this rest for at least 30 minutes. It's even looking good from the bottom, much better than I expected. And even an ear here, you can see a little bit of an ear. I hope for a little bit more, but I feel that maybe that was because my knife just simply wasn't sharp enough. Probably I tore the dough a little bit apart. Here, this pattern here, it did not really expand that much in the oven as I hoped. But just listen to this. Sounding very dull, nice crust. Again, I'll let that rest and then I'll show you the final crumb shot. Now it's time to slice it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's been around 4 hours in total from starting to add everything together until now. So it took a little bit longer than I expected. Luckily, the guests did not arrive yet. If you want to speed that up even more, just add a little bit more yeast and then you might be able to reduce the full time by another hour or so. You could also be adding a little bit of sugar, which I don't like that much, but that's something you could do to speed up the whole